Inside the courtroom, one decision could change two lives forever. YNW Bortlen has been offered a deal freedom in about 10 years, or 5 life sentences stacked on top of each other. The real question is, will he betray his best friend to save himself? 16 years on the table, but if YNW Bortlen says no, he's looking at 5 life sentences plus 75 more years. Which path will he take? Loyalty on one side, survival on the other. In court, YNW Melly and Bortlen sat in silence, but the tension said everything. If Bortlen flips, Melly's entire future could collapse overnight. The courtroom was tense as prosecutors laid out the state's offer to Mr. Henry, better known as YNW Bortlen. If he refuses, the stakes couldn't be higher: 5 life sentences stacked on top of one another, plus an additional 75 years. Each major charge he faces carries the possibility of life in a Florida prison. At the same time, the internet played a role in building the case. From the PC Gambino account, someone asked if Melly was okay. His response? "I did that," followed by a smiling emoji. Investigators later claimed evidence tied back to his home, like surveillance footage sitting inside a DVD player, making the connection hard to ignore. In court, the atmosphere was heavy, and all eyes were on YNW Melly as the judge laid out the latest updates in his case. For the first time, Melly looked visibly shaken. The news wasn't just about him. His co-defendant, Courtland Henry, better known as Bortlen, had been offered a plea deal that could change the direction of the entire trial. Prosecutors put 16 years on the table. With time already served, that could mean freedom in just about a decade. But here's the catch. If Bortlen refuses, he risks spending the rest of his life behind bars, facing multiple life sentences stacked on top of each other. The offer comes with weighty context. Bortlen is facing charges that include 2 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of witness tampering, directing criminal activity, and conspiracy. Taken together, those charges could easily result in 5 life sentences plus an additional 75 years. For someone his age, that's essentially a death sentence. So, the plea deal isn't just a legal move, it's a lifeline. Prosecutors are dangling the possibility of a second chance at life, but only if Bortlen cooperates. From the beginning, this case has been unusual. Typically, when multiple defendants are charged together, prosecutors try them at the same time. That way, the state saves resources and jurors can hear how the stories overlap. But with Melly's retrial delayed until at least January 2027, the prosecution has shifted strategy. They've decided to separate the cases, making it clear they see Bortlen as a potential star witness against Melly. And this is where things get complicated. On paper, Melly and Bortlen were close friends, practically brothers. They grew up together, shared the same musical dreams, and were part of the YNW movement. But when the charges came down, their bond fractured. Prosecutors believe Melly was the shooter, while Bortlen helped cover it up. They say his lies to investigators, his behavior at the hospital, and the gunpowder residue found on his hands show that he was deeply involved in the cover-up. But involvement in a cover-up isn't the same as pulling the trigger. That distinction is why the state is willing to strike a deal. Bortlen's interrogation highlighted just how fragile the story was. He told detectives he was driving when shots rang out, claiming he ducked down and tried to avoid being hit. But when officers canvassed the area he described, they didn't find a single casing, no broken glass, no signs of a shootout. His account didn't line up with the physical evidence, and the more he insisted, the less believable he became. Detectives pressed him, pointing out that he was doing his friends no favors by sticking to a false story. Still, he refused to break. What prosecutors now hope is that the threat of life in prison will finally push him to talk. If he takes the deal, his testimony could provide the missing puzzle piece in Melly's case. He could confirm what investigators already suspect, that Melly fired the shots from the back left seat of the Jeep, killing his 2 closest friends, Sack Chaser and Juvie. The ballistics evidence points in that direction, and Juvie's mother testified that she saw her son enter the car on the back right while Melly entered on the back left. Forensic reports show the bullets traveled from left to right, matching the state's theory. Adding to that is the digital trail. Hours after the killings, Melly was still messaging friends and dropping his location to be picked up. He was even seen on video dancing and smiling with Bortlen only hours later, which prosecutors argue shows a shocking lack of remorse. To them, this isn't just about a murder case, it's about motive. Witnesses claim Melly confided in King Von, frustrated that Sack Chaser and Juvie were taking too much of his money. Prosecutors say Melly didn't want to split YNW profits anymore, and that greed became the fuel for betrayal. But it isn't just murder charges weighing him down. Melly is also accused of witness tampering. His ex-girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton, said he pressured her to leave the country so she couldn't testify. She stayed away for 3 years, but was arrested as soon as she returned to the U.S. Court records show she was ordered to testify in Melly's first trial in 2023, and digital records back up claims that he told her not to cooperate. That single charge carries a life sentence by itself. This is where the plea deal for Bortlen takes on even greater importance. If he flips, his testimony could back up the state's case not only on the murders, but also on the tampering and conspiracy charges. He knows Melly's habits, his state of mind, and what happened in those crucial hours after the killings. For the state, he's not just another defendant. He's the key that could lock Melly away for good. But there's another side to the story. Taking the deal means betraying someone he once considered family. It means standing in front of a jury and pointing the finger at Melly, knowing that his words could decide whether Melly spends his life in prison or even faces the death penalty. For Bortlen, it's a brutal choice: loyalty to a friend or survival. Inside the courtroom, that tension was clear. Melly, who had always appeared confident and even defiant during earlier hearings, looked unsettled as the terms of the deal were read aloud. If his co-defendant cooperates, the defense strategy he's relied on could collapse overnight. His team knows it. Prosecutors know it. And Bortlen surely knows it too. The next move lies with him. 16 years with the chance of walking free in 10, or 5 stacked life sentences that all but guarantee he never steps outside a prison yard again. The deal isn't just about punishment. It's about leverage. And whichever path Bortlen chooses will shape the future of both men, for better or worse. The charges stacked against YNW Melly are nothing short of overwhelming, and when the court clerk read them aloud, the list sounded like a drumbeat of doom. Each count represents years, sometimes decades, of prison time, and together they paint the picture of a man boxed in by the law, with very few exits left open. The most serious accusations are counts 1 and 2, first-degree murder with a firearm. In Florida, these are capital felonies, meaning the punishment isn't just harsh, it's absolute. If the jury finds him guilty, the sentence is mandatory life in prison. No appeals for leniency, no opportunities for a reduced term. The judge has no discretion here. The law ties their hands. Life means life. And if prosecutors push for it, the death penalty could also come into play. But those aren't the only charges weighing him down. Counts 3 and 4 accuse him of being an accessory after the fact to murder in the first degree. On paper, this might sound like a lesser role, but the penalties are far from light. Each charge carries a maximum of 30 years in prison. That's 3 full decades per count, and together they add up to 60 years, long enough to erase an entire lifetime outside. Then there are the charges that complicate the case even further. One is tampering with a witness in a capital case. That alone can result in a life sentence. Prosecutors allege Melly tried to manipulate people around him, pressuring them not to cooperate with authorities, and in one instance, even convincing someone to leave the country for years. In the eyes of the law, this isn't just bad behavior, it's obstruction of justice on the highest level, and Florida treats it with the same severity as murder itself. Another count accuses him of directing the activities of a criminal gang. This, too, is classified as a first-degree felony punishable by life in prison. The state argues that Melly wasn't just a participant, but a leader, orchestrating actions that tie back to gang activity. Whether through hand signs, coded language online, or affiliations in the music world, prosecutors are determined to show that his influence extended beyond music and into organized crime. Finally, there's conspiracy to commit tampering. At first glance, conspiracy might not sound as intimidating, but in Florida law, plotting to interfere with witnesses or evidence in a capital case can carry the same punishment as the act itself. Once again, the maximum penalty here is life. When you add all of these charges together, the numbers stop feeling real. Life sentence stacked on life sentence, followed by another life, followed by decades more. It's a mountain of punishment that no one could ever climb. In fact, when prosecutors first explained the potential outcomes to Melly's co-defendant, they listed it bluntly: life in prison, followed by life, followed by life, followed by life, followed by life, plus 75 years. It almost sounded absurd, but that absurdity is the point. The state wants the jury to know that every angle of this case carries devastating consequences. For Melly, Sitting in that courtroom, hearing each count read aloud is more than a legal formality. It's a reminder of just how small his margin of survival has become. Every charge is like another lock on a cell door, another brick in a wall closing in around him. And prosecutors know it. They have stacked the deck in such a way that even if a jury doubts the murder charges, the lesser counts could still ensure he never sees freedom again. That's the strategy. The murder charges are the centerpiece, but the tampering, conspiracy, and gang activity counts are safety nets. If jurors hesitate to convict on the most serious crimes, the state still has a pathway to keep him behind bars for life. It's not unusual in high-profile cases for prosecutors to layer charges like this, but in Melly's situation, the sheer volume of life-eligible counts is staggering. Defense attorneys understand the stakes, too. Their job isn't just to argue innocence, but to chip away at each individual charge, hoping to convince the jury that at least some of the allegations don't hold up. If they can weaken the state's narrative on even 1 or 2 counts, they can reduce the potential sentences. But as things stand, the state has built a legal wall where every path leads to the same destination: prison for life. Beyond the courtroom, these charges also influence public perception. Fans who once saw Melly as a rising star now hear the words capital felony and life in prison tied to his name over and over again. Each headline reinforces the gravity of the accusations, making it harder for the defense to argue that he's simply a victim of circumstance or misunderstanding. The charges themselves, regardless of outcome, are powerful tools for shaping opinion. And then there's the human element. Family members, friends, and supporters sit in the courtroom listening to these counts too. For them, it's a devastating reality check. Every mention of life in prison isn't just about Melly. It's about years without a son, a brother, a friend. His mother, in particular, has been outspoken about the way the system has treated him, insisting he hasn't been convicted and shouldn't be punished prematurely. But the language of the charges leaves little room for comfort. The details of these accusations, murder, tampering, conspiracy, directing gang activity, are not light or negotiable. They are some of the harshest crimes in Florida's legal code, and each one carries penalties designed to permanently remove people from society. Together, they form an avalanche that threatens to bury Melly completely, regardless of how the murder trial itself plays out. In the end, the picture is clear. Even if he manages to beat the murder charges, the surrounding counts are like a trap set on every side. One misstep, one guilty verdict on any of the major felonies, and his freedom is gone forever. That is the grim reality of what he's facing, and why every move in this trial matters so much. So why would prosecutors consider a deal at all? Several reasons point back to Bortlen's role. On the night of the killings, police questioned him. When asked if he knew who committed the crime, he shook his head no. His hesitation and nervous body language suggested fear rather than certainty. Investigators also believe he wasn't the main shooter, since they already have digital evidence suggesting Melly admitted involvement. This explains why the state sees Bortlen as a potential witness against Melly. The trial, however, has been repeatedly delayed. Originally set for September, it has now been pushed all the way to January 2027. In the meantime, a strict no-contact order separates the two men. Prosecutors don't want their legal teams working together. They want Bortlen to flip. The state originally wanted to try both defendants together, hoping they'd incriminate one another in court. But Melly's side pushed for a split trial, buying more time. If convicted, Melly could face the death penalty, while Bortlen's fate would depend heavily on his cooperation. For Bortlen, the pressure is immense. Prosecutors argue he was caught in lies from the beginning, showing up at the hospital with a car full of bullet holes, a change of clothes, and gunpowder residue on his hands. Detectives confirmed traces of residue on both hands, proof that he had fired a weapon. When Melly's mistrial was declared, Bortlen appeared to mock the situation online, tweeting, "Mind games don't work on people like me," with a handshake emoji. But soon after, more trouble came. Police raided his home and found notes that allegedly mapped out jurors, complete with seat placements and descriptions of their appearance. To prosecutors, this looked like a plan to intimidate or sway the jury, leading to new charges of witness tampering. The warrant states this behavior stretched from April to July 2023, overlapping directly with Melly's trial and mistrial. The evidence paints a messy picture: notebooks in his home, drawings of jurors, and attempts to influence the outcome. As one commentator bluntly put it, keeping those notes at home was careless, like committing a crime and then leaving the surveillance footage in your DVD player. For Bortlen, that mistake might cost him the one chance he has left, a plea deal that could spare him from spending the rest of his life in prison. Prosecutors painted a troubling picture when presenting new evidence against YNW Melly. They claim that, just minutes after Sack Chaser and Juvie were found dead, Fredo Bang picked Melly up. Phone records back this up. At 4:42 in the morning, Melly sent his location to his friend Frederick Givens, better known in the music industry as Fredo Bang. 11 minutes later, Melly sent another pin showing he had moved slightly, further tying him to the scene that night. But it doesn't stop there. Prosecutors want to add street team charges, arguing Melly was connected to the same circle as Young Thug's YSL crew. They pointed to Facebook posts where Melly flashed gang signs, used YSL slang, and added hashtags linking YNW and YSL. Even Melly's own lawyers objected, but he interrupted them in court, telling the judge he didn't care. Witnesses said Melly's frustration boiled over as he clashed with his defense team for the first time in public. The state also introduced possible motive. A witness claimed that Melly once asked King Von for advice on how to deal with friends, Sack Chaser and Juvie, who he felt were taking too much money. According to testimony, Melly didn't want to keep sharing YNW profits, and that resentment may have been a trigger for the crime. On top of the 2 murder charges, Melly is also fighting multiple counts of witness tampering. In one case, he allegedly pressured his ex-girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton, to flee the country so she wouldn't testify. She stayed away for 3 years, but was arrested the moment she returned to the U.S. Court records show she was ordered to testify in Melly's 2023 trial, and investigators found iCloud messages where Melly told her not to take the stand. Now, Melly faces 6 additional charges, including tampering with a witness, conspiracy, solicitation, and unlawful use of communication devices. Some of these carry life sentences on their own. Because of concerns that he'd interfere further, Melly has been banned from using jail phones for over a year. His mother, however, has spoken out, calling the treatment unfair. She says her son hasn't been convicted yet and should still have the right to phone calls and mail. But not everyone agrees. Commentator Charleston White said he was glad Melly wasn't receiving special treatment, arguing that someone accused of taking lives has no right to complain about jail conditions. On the other side, rapper Boosie showed compassion after meeting Melly's mother. He described her as genuine and clearly weighed down by stress, offering her support while she continues to fight for her son. Boosie explained that meeting Melly's mother reminded him of his own mom's struggles, and he felt compelled to reach out. But behind that compassion, prosecutors were sharpening their case with new evidence. 5 hours after Sack Chaser and Juvie were killed, investigators say Melly and Bortlen weren't grieving. They were caught on camera dancing and celebrating, showing no signs of loss. That footage, prosecutors argue, speaks volumes. Court records also point to where Melly was sitting the night of the shooting. Witnesses confirmed he entered the back left seat of the Jeep. Forensic reports back this up. The bullets traveled from left to right, matching the position where Melly sat. Juvie's mother herself testified that her son was in the back right seat, while Melly was on the left, the very spot investigators believe the shots came from. To strengthen their case, prosecutors also turned to Bortlen's police interrogation. From the start, his story raised red flags. He told officers he was driving home from the studio, half asleep, when gunfire suddenly erupted. According to him, he ducked down, nearly crashed, and tried to keep control of the car. But his version didn't line up with the evidence. Investigators shut down the entire area he described, yet they found no shell casings, no shattered glass, no signs of a shooting where he claimed it happened. Officers pressed him, pointing out that if bullets really hit the car, evidence had to be left behind. Bortlen stuck to his story, but grew frustrated when detectives kept challenging him. "You're doing your friends a disservice by not telling us the truth," one officer said. But Bortlen insisted he was being honest, even as his answers contradicted the physical evidence. His frustration eventually boiled over. He cut off the interview, saying he didn't want to talk anymore. Detectives warned him walking away wouldn't stop the questions. They needed the truth to understand what really happened that night. But instead of answers, they were left with a story that just didn't add up.